Nā mai haere mai. Welcome to the Air Quality Transport and Urban Development Committee meeting for this day, the 27th of July. And I'll just run through the protocols that due to COVID-19 orange traffic light restrictions, this meeting is being held online. Therefore, there is no public in attendance except those attending public forum online. This meeting will be recorded and made available at the ECAN website. For those members who are joining us online, please use the chat function to speak or question, and your silence on any motion is taken as agreement. I've been informed there is a quorum and that I'm pleased to declare this meeting open. And just to mention the fact that we have Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie online, and we've been joined online by Lauren Patamore from Stuff. So just to make you aware of that. To open the meeting with a Mihi, I'll ask Councillor Craig to do that, and then we'll go to Councillor Hands for Karakia. So,
tēnā koe Peter, te kaihautu o tēnei committee, tēnā koe. E rau rangatira mā, ka hara mai nei tēnei rā i tō tātou komiti. Tēnā koutou, ka huri au taka whakaro, ki ngā tini aitua, ka wehi atu ki te pō, ai e ngā mate, o ia marae, o ia takiwa, ia whenua, moi mai rā, haere atura. Rātou kia rātou, tātou kia tātou tuhunga ora, tēnā tātou. Ki ngā kaimahi, ka hara mai ki te tautoko, tō tātou mahi, i tēnei komiti, tēnā koutou. Ki ngā manuhiri, ko tā mai nei, tēnā koe, te ripota, tēnā koe. Tēnā tātou, ka hau atu te rākau kia Councillor Hands o te Karakia Timatanga. Kia ora.
Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hiaki ana te atukura, he teo, he huka, he hauhu, tihei, mauri ora.
Kia ora, thank you, Councillor Hands, and thank you, Councillor Pauling, for the mihi. Just moving to item 2 on apologies, we have an apology from Chair Huey, who will be absent from this meeting, and from Councillor Farm, who's unavailable to attend due to her COVID. Are there any conflicts of interest? I'm not been made aware of any. There is no public formal deputation, no extra or ordinary business. And there are no notices of motion. So if we could move to 7.1, the unconfirmed minutes of the Air Quality Transport and Urban Development Committee meeting of the 2nd of June 2020. They're on page 10 of your agenda. And what we are looking for here is any items of accuracy in those minutes. Okay, there doesn't seem to be any matters of accuracy, and the motion that the Air Quality Transport and Urban Development Committee confirms the minutes of the Air Quality Transport and Urban Development Committee meeting held on the 2nd of June 2022 is on the screen. Can I have a mover for that, please? Thank you, Timatanga Cranwell, and seconded by Councillor Edge. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, and that is carried. So moving now to 8.1, which is Air Quality Transport and Urban Development. Did we do the motions? No, have we got that there?
We don't.
No, we don't. Sorry, 8.1. So I'll ask Jess Burgess to come to the table. And this is on page 19. Are there any matters of clarifications sort of, Jess, on 8.1? There doesn't seem to be. So that motion will be up soon. Thank you. So 8.1, that the Air Quality Transport and Urban Development Committee notes the status of the previous resolutions provided in the status of the Air Quality Transport and Urban Development Committee Resolutions Report July 2022. Can I have a mover for that motion, please? Thank you, thank you, Nicole, and a seconder. Thank you, Claire. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, carried. So moving to 8.2, and I think that Jeremy Dixon's in the room. So this 8.2 is transforming public transport work program, and this is page 24 of the agenda. So Jeremy, thank you.
Kia ora koutou. I'll take the report as read. I think it's pretty comprehensive, talks about our work program and what we've been doing recently. I think there are a couple of points just to point out elements that we've delivered in the last couple of months, and those are the tertiary concessions are live, and we also have the Super Gold Card changes that were adopted in the annual plan. Those are live as well, and the new service to Cass Bay went live as of Monday this week, I think, as well. So those are all, we'll go through the process of reviewing their effectiveness, etc., but they are live in situ.
Thank you, Jeremy. Now I know there are some questions of clarification for you around this report, so we'll firstly go and ask for those from councillors, and then once we've finished that process, you can step back, Jeremy, and then we'll go to some, if there is any discussion on that. So councillors, we have a question of Jeremy. Councillor Southworth.
I had one about, so we've got the half price fares that are now been extended through to the end of January 2023, I understand. And I know we were intending for our fare trial with black fares go through from February 1st, I believe, 2023. So there should be just a neat switch from one to the other. Is that the expectation?
That would be the ideal outcome for us. That will be dependent on a couple of things. One is we still are doing the work and planning the work for the both the technical elements of that solution, which is the trickiest bit on our end, which will enable us to go live on 1 February 2022. So that's one thing. If we have any challenges there, that might delay that, but we're not anticipating that at this stage. The other unknown is whether or not the government decides to extend the half price fares again. And if that happens, then it's conceivable that we would re-look at the value of the fare changes based on the fact that their half price fares could become quite messy from a customer perspective, as well as from our perspective, trying to actually implement that and report on it, etc.
Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of, if let's assume the government does finish at the end of Jan, and if the timeline pushes out a bit for our readiness, will there be plenty of notice you'll know that presumably in some time? And what I'm thinking is it might be worthwhile us considering covering the half price to go for an extra week or 2 or 3 to ensure there's like a smooth, rather than some little blip in the middle, which could be quite
Yeah, look, 100%, and we've got a project plan involved, and we're working through those elements, and that's one of the, how do you mitigate risk, but how do you adapt based on the plan evolving? So that would be something we'd consider at that time.
Councillor Clearwater.
Thank you for the report, Jeremy. I want to ask you about the item on page 26.12 under community engagement. And at the end of that, Jeremy, there's a reference to, I guess I've got the question really that starts with, can you give me an indication as to when there's going to be a route review of the Horseville service number 7, when that might be going to be able to be undertaken, please?
So the next lot of it's not just the 7 that will be reviewed, but it's the area of our network that we're going to review yet, aligned with the PT Futures program of work. So that will be Horseville and the surrounding communities. So anywhere that is serviced along that area of the city. So there'll be a more holistic review, which will be looking at what are the outcomes that the community want, and how do we deliver that best via public transport services. That will definitely include the 7. and it will include what Hallsville wants, Wigram, other areas close by. So the review itself will look at that area rather than just Hallsville. And our intent is to start the discovery for that this calendar year. Once we've done the discovery, the next process is to actually do the engagement proper with the community to understand, what might it look like, what are your thoughts on this, and then we review and we work out actually what's the price going to be and what's the community willing to pay to achieve that. So the bulk of the work will start that this year. The bulk of the work will happen in 2023. And then, ideally we'd implement in 2024, but that's dependent on a lot of factors outside of our control at the moment.
Thank you, Jeremy. Can I also just ask you then, councillors are also aware, I guess, that in terms of that Hallsville and the surrounding area, in fact, that is probably the fastest growing area in the city, and timely that at least this year we make a start on that consultation. So I'm pleased to hear that. And I'm also pleased to see that some of the groups who have previously, been involved with making submissions here, for example, the Cass Bay residents, that they are a part of the whole public transport stakeholder reference group. So I just want to ask you about that, though, because you say that those groups it's not limited to that. So I just wondered if, given the the input that the Hallsville Residents Association, for example, that they've made to this council, and I'm just going to mention a couple of the areas that they have submitted on. Their interest has also been in changes in level of service they've talked about, addressing environmental impacts of buses from our contracts, the fare structure they've submitted on, and around the whole new subdivisions area, how that can be integrated into the network. They've already submitted on that. So I just would really like to know how, in fact, such a significant resident association, given, okay, there's 74, I appreciate that, residents groups, and you can't talk, we have limited engagement resources. But when a group who are, in my view, so key in terms of the transport planning in that area, when they might be able to be involved with the reference group.
So I think that's most likely to occur next year. So as we've noted, we've established sort of from the ground up public transport stakeholder reference group, where we're trying to learn from our engagement in the past and reflecting council's desire to engage more in depth and heavily with the community, develop a reference group with representing a lot of different areas of the community or user people groups within the community. So that, via that, part of that will include the community boards or local residents associations. And as I said, that's in its genesis at the moment. That there's not a terms of reference for that reference group at the moment. But as that develops, then we're anticipating via that that we will include, work out the engagement with the Hallsville and the other residents associations as well.
A further question, if I may. Thank you, Jeremy. It does concern me that such a significant organisation is going to be left out until next year, given though that the beginnings of the consultation are happening this year. So I also though want to just ask you about when elected members might be able to become part of the stakeholder reference group that you referred to, because my understanding is that today councillors haven't been involved, and I'd just like an indication of when we might be able to be.
So just to clarify, we will be with the engagement with Hallsville, Wigram, associated areas. This year is discovery, so we won't be engaging with the community. We'll be in discovery mode. So that's understanding what the engagement looks like, what some of the options might be prior to actually engaging with the community. So we will be, when we engage with the community, we'll be engaging with all of the community. We won't be sort of excluding anyone. In terms of councillor engagement in the working groups or stakeholder reference group, we've intentionally at this stage built that from the ground up because we've wanted to we're focused on making sure that we're engaging with or using as reference groups appropriate subsets of the communities, of the Greater Christchurch community. So the next, as I said, the terms of reference don't exist for those groups yet, and the intent has been to, again, taking the building up from the ground up approach to ascertain, I suppose, take their feedback, but also take them on the journey of what level of engagement do they feel is appropriate. It's not to say councillors won't have input into this, but what level of engagement do they think is appropriate for councillors to have, and how that's going to enable them to get the best outcomes and feel like they can have freedom.
Thanks for explaining that process, Jeremy. My last question really is, just following from what you've said, I would assume that there's no reason, for example, that the co-chairs of this committee, that they not be involved in forming and those terms of reference. None at all.
No reason that there's no involvement in that. Yep.
Thank you for that. Those questions, Phil's got Councillor Edge, then Councillor Elizabeth McKenzie.
Thanks, Jeremy. I've just got two questions for clarification, really. On page 29, item 23, I wonder if you could clarify the situation with the community services card concession and the difficulties that you're thinking we might have with that.
Well, so we've got as you know, we've now got until February 2023 to implement that. The key difficulty, ultimately, this is about we're wanting to deliver, well, the government's wanting to deliver benefit to community services card holders, and to maximise that benefit, we've got to make it easy for them to engage with the service. That's the number one thing that's going to enable that to happen. So our current ticketing solution it's been in place. I think we signed the contract in 2009. So it's an older ticketing system, and it's iteration -1 or -2. So it's not as nimble and agile as some of the newer ticketing solutions. So to make the customer experience as seamless as possible, we want to be able to integrate Metro cards completely with our ticketing solution. And so we're in the middle of the discovery work with our technology provider at the moment to understand, can we achieve that, and how might we achieve that? And ideally, the answer, we're reasonably confident we'll get there, but we can't commit to that till we've seen a statement of work that says this is what it looks like. But that's the complexity, and once we've done that, then we can have an all electronic solution. Means it's seamless from a customer perspective. They can use their current card, or they can get a new card, order it online quite easily. The alternative is for them to have to go to MSD offices or kiosks or other such things, which are not convenient, and also there's a bit of potential stigma associated with, dignity element, having to present your community services card in person, which we're trying to avoid.
Thank you. That's great. And then my second question is just clarification on page 30, item 27. Just clarity around the emissions reduction plan issues from the government. Are we still waiting on the decisions on that?
Yeah, so what we're still waiting on the actual process that Waka Kotahi or central government are going to use to distribute, what process and what conditions. They had indicated to us as officers that they'd have that soon, early in July, but we still haven't seen that. So we're doing some thinking and working with other parts of the organisation around what we'd like to activate through that or achieve through that, but we don't have a formal process at the moment to engage with Waka Kotahi on that.
Okay, Elizabeth.
Yep. Hi, I've got two questions. They just relate to the impact of climate change and the impact of COVID on the Transforming Public Transport program. So firstly, how are you incorporating the rising groundwater levels and increased surface flooding in Christchurch from climate change with the design of your bus routes?
So there's a short or a long answer to that question. The short answer is that we're not actively incorporating that in the design of our bus networks. when the bus networks go on roading networks, which are designed by the territorial authority, and it's obviously it's their role and responsibility to develop roading networks that are robust and fit for purpose. We have so that's ground up. That's where it starts, and our network needs to Councillor Clearwater's comments, a network needs to go where our customers are. So we're restricted in a lot of the city by the roads that exist. We have good, I suppose, mitigation policies and procedures in times where there are issues like we've had in the last couple of days. So we've got really good communications with the City Council in terms of what roads are closed. We update our website so our customers know if there are any details. We update our electronic systems so we're able to reroute the network. So I'm not sure if I should look here or there, but we're able to reroute the network in real time based on any events that happen.
So before you get
Thank
to your
you.
second question, Elizabeth, Jess
Yep.
wants to add on to that. Thanks.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So in the next paper in the agenda, we've also covered the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan, and that is looking at the constraints analysis for Greater Christchurch in particular, and things mapping areas of flood risk and those kind of things, those natural hazards. So that's informed our urban form scenarios in the transport system, if you like, for our public transport networks and others. So that work's all interconnected. So in terms of the broader climate change outcomes that we're seeking, the spatial plan is a really important part of setting the future direction for Greater Christchurch, which is largely where our predominant PT system is.
Okay, so my second question. So a couple of weeks ago, and I apologise, I didn't flag this earlier. A couple of weeks ago, a University of Auckland study came out which showed that many modern buses are not well ventilated, and thus passengers may have an increased risk of, transmission of bugs and things. So will you be assessing this issue of ventilation on the Christchurch buses or on our bus fleet going forward?
So I think that we will be assessing that as an industry. So nationally, that's not just a Canterbury issue. And so we're aware that the studies come out, but no assessment has begun yet. But we will have to review that as an industry. When I talk about industry, I'm talking about all the public transport authorities in Waka Kotahi to ascertain the validity of that, and then if so, what next?
Thanks.
All right, we've just probably come to the end of clarification, but Nicole's next, and then we'll you can step back to you, Jeremy, I think, and then we can have some discussion. Put the motion and have some discussion. Thanks, Nicole.
Kia ora. Thanks, Chair. On page 33, it has the table of our work program. Just a question specifically around PT Futures. We have PT Futures, the business case, obviously on our website. However, there's no timelines or anything associated with network reviews or anything like that. And we've touched briefly on that discussion already today, that the sort of Horsfall segment of the city is coming up for review starting later this year. What about the rest of the network? And do we have, solid comms plans so we actually get the engagement, to get the network rollout that the people want?
Yeah, I can gather further information and provide it to you on that. I think the challenge is people don't actually care what you're doing in 6 years' time. No one's going to remember what you told them 6 years ago. So we're taking a structured approach to where investment should be in that. We've got a PT Futures it's got 10 years worth of investment that we're investing at the moment. So yeah, it's not quite just in time engagement because we need to take a lot of time to do the engagement. But we know at this stage where our next, and I can't tell you off the top of my head because this is not my part of the business, but we know where our engagement is. We're working, City Council's investing in Lincoln Road at the moment, a reasonable amount of money, and so aligned with that, we're looking at our engagement with the community to one of those one of the outcomes will undoubtedly be increased frequency because there are bus lanes there. So we have a sort of medium-term horizon, which is one that makes sense, and we have significant communications plans associated with those. I suppose we could and then there's the process which we'll go through in the next, I think, 2024 when we review our regional public transport plan. So there will be that opportunity to engage with the wider community through that to give them a sense, well, this is actually where we're heading. Does this still make sense to you or not? So, yeah, I don't know if that gives you context, I suppose, but our investment in long-term communications, there's limited value to that. Would be our assessment this time.
And in terms of the staging of when the various sectors of the city will be reviewed?
Yeah, and I can think that.
Ski button, sorry.
Jess will set up again and add some more context. Button, please, Jeremy.
I was just going to add what Jeremy said, just as my role as the chair of the Transport Managers Group here in Greater Christchurch. So the PT Futures program of work, it's a 10-year program of work. We are looking at what acceleration opportunities there are within that, and that's the work that's underway at the moment. Sonia Pollard in our PT team is doing that work with our consultants, WSP. So that's looking at what work could be potentially brought forward. So when we went through the LTP, we moved some of that funding to the latter part of the LTP. Now it's like, well, actually, how, because of COVID and affordability, so what can we bring potentially forward? So that work's underway. That has an impact, as I understand it, in terms of the service reviews. So how you approach that as related to the investment in the infrastructure that you're delivering as well. So this is where it's such an integrated program of work with our partners. That work's underway to understand what a revised package could look like to accelerate the investment we have in PT and obviously achieve our emissions reductions and other targets.
So through PT Futures, we've got a 10-year program of works, and so across that 10 years, in theory, all of our network will be reviewed, and we don't know exactly when that review will happen because we're currently relooking at staging. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
The PT Futures was only signed off by the GCP and by the partner councils around 18 months ago. And then the decision a few months later was, well, can we potentially accelerate some of this? And so that's not just a simple piece of work, and the increased costs and other things that we've seen, obviously, with inflation and some of the other challenges that we've discussed with council previously, all of that collectively is a significant piece of work. We've also got underway the Greater Christchurch Transport Plan work, which is building off the work the City Council's been doing. That includes an investment program within it as well. So this is where we can partner with central government in terms of investing in our transport network, particularly PT, which is a significant component of that. So there's a number of different initiatives underway at the moment, a lot of which is tied to our emissions reduction and reducing vehicle kilometres travelled across the sub-region. So we'll be bringing more updates back to council as we move through that work.
Yeah. Any sort of timelining information or forecasting around when different aspects of our community could be expecting to hear from us, just so that we are also aware, that would be really valuable.
Okay, thank you, councillors. I think we'll put a line under us. We'll put the motion up here and it's on the board before us. And this just receiving the Transforming Public Transport Work Program. So can I have a mover for that? Thank you, Tane, and a seconder. Thank you, Grant.
Can I flag? I'd like to make an amendment after that.
Yeah. I'd like to preface the start of this by saying thanks for your question, Phil, because I think that public consultation piece was uncovered, and this was all the other things that we needed to find. So thanks for that, Jeremy, and also Jesse. Thanks, councillors, for their questions. Now, Phil.
I might perhaps, just for clarity, I perhaps might start by indicating what my amendment is, and then make it some comments. So my amendment to this item, to the recommendations, is it's noted as a resolution that the co-chairs of Air Transport and Urban Development Committee are involved in the development of the terms of reference for the Public Transport Stakeholder Reference Group. So that, and I'm happy to give that to staff to make a note of. So I think it's a really good report, and it's indicative of a huge amount of work that our transport staff have been doing. There's no question of that. I'm also well aware that one of the most difficult parts of transport planning and a lot of things is actually around how we do our engagement. And full marks to our council staff who, around the annual plan engaged brilliantly, I think, with Rapaki and also with the Cass Bay residents. And they were groups who really wanted to be involved. I guess it concerns me though around, I guess, the framework of this, the stakeholder reference group, when I hear that in fact a key residents group like the Hallsville residents group is not going to be even part of the discovery exploration until next year. We know that at the same time as City Council are investing in bus lanes down Lincoln Road and further out Hallsville Road, that in fact they are indeed talking with this residents group. It just seems to me that the left hand and right hand must work together and perhaps better than we are. And that's nobody's fault. It's actually kind of like how the system is at the moment. But, with that particular residents group, they've talked with us often, as I've indicated. They've always been constructive in their dialogue. And I think we need to ensure that we have groups like that on board within the appropriate framework. And we should talk to them early on, not leave them to be last cab on the rank. I'm referring particularly in my amendment, thank you, to involvement of our co-chairs, because I think clearly, there's a whole governance part that needs to be involved with this. Okay, I'm one councillor who happens to be a regular bus user and know a bit about buses like some of my other colleagues. But I just think that it'll be good to look at really how we shape this whole engagement approach, and so that in fact we involve everybody. Thank you.
I think what we'll do is we'll separate these. So we'll put Tony and Grant on the first one, and then Phil, you're moving that amendment, you're moving that addition there actually. Yes. And so can we see if we can get a second for this now? So you want seconded by Councillor Southworth. Any further discussion on this? This to me is pretty straightforward actually, but I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on it. But is anybody else that would like to talk about this? Councillor Pauling.
I just wanted to thank Phil for raising the issues about getting the residents association involved, in particular Hallsville, for the upcoming route review. One thing that I do support in what Phil said is the involvement of elected members in the process. I don't know if we need to be necessarily on the working groups, but I think it is a good idea that both the City Council ward councillor and the ECAN councillors for those areas help staff with the public meetings and any public engagement that are happening. Because I just think that's an important thing for us to be doing as councillors, and I'm sure that the City Council councillors would see that too, because they get a lot of feedback. I know the City Council ones do about public transport, because the community don't actually know sometimes the difference who they should talk to. So I just think it'd be really good, and I'm not saying that's an amendment, but it just relates to some of the things that Phil said. So I support the idea of elected members being more involved, in those processes.
It's a bit unclear about the timeframes and whether there will still be co-chairs at the time that this all gets up and running. Might be a bit prescriptive there. But look, I think we're asking our staff to be fairly agile in amongst a think big. And when you hit a think big and you sign that off, you've got to sort of accept the fact that these agilities probably won't exist, and asking staff to bank them left, right and centre. Like if we keep coming back with reports, we're going to keep asking for different bits and pieces. So yeah, I sort of feel for staff here, because we're the ones who have put them in this boat, and now we're not happy with the boat, basically. And that's what happens when you sign off something massive like PT Futures. Having been on council now for 2 years, or just over, I'm actually not a fan of PT Futures because it's just far too big. And now we're trying to dissect it and bring things forwards and shuffle things around, and that's just proven to be an absolute nightmare. So yeah, more of a comment, I suppose, than question.
You, Councillor Apanui, Councillor Edge, in a bit.
Thanks, Chair. No, I support this. I mean, it's kind of one of those things that the more that we can be seen to be engaging and helping that engagement process, coordinating with staff and external people is part of that participatory democracy issue that we discussed this morning. And so I think it's all good so that people are feeling that they have some say, and it's just part of that communication process.
Vivi.
Could I just like a point of clarification in terms of that amendment? Could you please clarify for me the alignment between the engagement and significance of Māori participation? Where's the alignment with that? Because it's saying that there is considerable consultation and working within this area. So how does that align with the list that has been put there and wanting to be able to add to that list? Because one of the questions, if I may just add in, was one of the things I asked under that engagement to myself in terms of iwi, well, what does that actually look like? So that engagement. So yeah, I'm kind of there, but I'm not there. I would just like to understand that alignment.
Can I just ask and just go outside our brief a wee bit here and bring Jeremy back into that, because I think that will be the best answer will be from staff. Jeremy.
Without getting into, well, I'll trip over myself by trying to get into too much detail because this is, but we're developing a new engagement framework, and there's and council's seen this, and there are sort of 4 I don't know if they're called pillars of engagement, but engagement communities, and one of those is the Ngāi iwi. So that it's a clear, it's in our top 4 from an engagement perspective, and we're actually working through with our internal staff in terms of what's actually the best way to engage that's going to be most beneficial. It's going to get the best outcomes. We don't want to waste people's time. We just sit down and have a hui and there's no outcome. There's no purpose for that. So we're very intentionally looking at how do we engage better and more fully with iwi. And yeah, you're in.
Kia ora, thank you, and thank you for your response. Mine was just a little bit of an add-on in terms of engagement with iwi. However, it still brings about that question of alignment that goes across from asking about the amendment to this recommendation and the linkage towards the engagement. I could have it wrong, but I just would like to understand.
I think that point's well.
It covered, really what I'm saying is, are we covering it?
Well, I think with point 2 here means that the councillors and those people responsible for public transport will take that forward with them. And in doing that, we would need to be taking mana whenua with us, given the fact that we'll probably have 2 of them in this room. So, we've got a big responsibility for that. And I know under the public transport stuff, that not public transport, the RTC stuff, we were looking for mana whenua engagement in that too in the next term. So I think we're fine. I think we're fine there. Vicky, I'll go to you next. We've as the seconder, because I want to wind this up. Well, question then.
Just a question of clarification on the amendment. It says that we're noting the chairs are involved in the development. Are they currently involved, or is this committee requesting the chairs be involved? Because I don't see us being involved at the moment. To my knowledge, at the moment, they are not involved. So is this resolution to request they be involved?
Happy to answer that, councillor. It is to be involved. I've just used the word are and becoming. But I think that's from our discussion is evident, and I'm sure that staff will see it their way. But if councillors want a slight change in the wording, I'm open to that too, but as long as it's clear.
My preference would be request as instead of notes, just to make it clear that this is something that council is requesting happen.
So, clarity, I'm happy that be amended that way, councillor. so that we change the word note so that we request that the co-chairs be involved.
Okay, put requests in there, the mover and the seconder, excuse me, have both agreed. So Vicky, as the seconder, you can get to speak to this, and then we'll go to Phil if you've got anything more to say, and then we need to put this and then move forward.
Great. Yeah, no, I'm happy to second this, and I know it's been raised throughout the entire term, so about getting more community involvement and really having that pathway for our communities to talk to us. Certainly as a councillor, I know I've had quite a number of people over the last nearly 3 years come to me and talk to me about public transport. So I think having that link to councillors, because community do know who we are, and they may not know the pathway through to talk directly to staff. So this is sort of formulating a process where it makes it much easier, but I think that linkage with councillors is really important as well. So I'm really pleased to see this. And just to note as well, to say with the Cascade bus, I know that was really, really gratefully received, and there was big cheer went up, I think, at the start of the term, this term for the students getting on there. And that's a perfect example of how things can work so well when we do have community involved. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And look, I think overall now as a council, we're on the same page around this matter, because it is around how we actually work collaboratively, not only as a council, but clearly with the organisation and the transport staff and all those things. I will mention too, though, that the chair of the said Residents Association, the Horsell one, is a former senior manager with Kiwi Rail. And there are a lot of, there's a lot of expertise that we can also clearly should be involving from outside, looking outside, and that includes probably bus passengers as well. So I'm happy with this. I'm sure that councils will support this. I think it's a good way to go. It's a way really of ensuring that in fact we sort of catch up in terms of how that of councillors, as Councillor South was said, be involved with engagement right from the start.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm going to do is the recommendation 2 is in front of us here. Request that co-chairs of the Air Quality Transport and Urban Development Committee are involved in development of the terms of reference for the public transport stakeholders reference group. So that's the motion, moved by Councillor Clearwater, seconded by Councillor Southworth. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? So that's carried. So thank you. And we'll then go back to number 1, which receives this report, a transport work program report. Moved by Councillor Apanui and seconded by Councillor Ed. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against? So that's carried. So thank you for that. We've sort of chewed a bit of time up here, and I think we've got another opportunity at 2 o'clock. And does it do?
The others, workshop around spatial plans at 2.
Yeah, so we've got a couple of items yet to go. So we're at 8.3. So this is integrating urban land use and regional transport work program report. And that's Jess. So thanks, Jess.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I'll be brief. So this paper for councillors covers a quick update on the integrating urban land use and regional transport work program. Covers the New Zealand Freight and Supply Chain Issues paper submission that the South Island RTC Chairs Group made back in June this year. It also covers the Canterbury Regional Land Transport Review, the speed management planning, new speed management planning rule, and also the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan, which we've got a briefing on after this. So just quickly, the New Zealand Freight and Supply Chain Issues paper. So this is part of the National Freight and Supply Chain Strategy Development. The Ministry consulted on that between April and June this year. As I said, South Island RTC Chairs Group made a submission on that, which is attached to the agenda. Key points of feedback included the need to work more effectively across the transport modes and to shift more towards a hub and spoke model over time. And this is, really important in terms of our freight movement across the South Island. And some of the challenges that we've particularly got within the South Island around our geography, some of the natural hazards that we face here in the South Island, in particular in Canterbury, and how we move our goods around the region, with a bigger shift towards coastal shipping and also rail freight, which is getting trucks off the roads, reducing emissions, increasing safety, less maintenance, a whole range of factors that come into that. So our submission's been incorporated into the final strategy in terms of its consideration. The Canterbury Regional Land Transport Plan review. So this was due for a midterm review by midway through 2024. Usually we run a bit of a shorter process, which would normally start around late 2023. And normally we would retain the 2021 strategic framework and then compile some of the transport activities for ranking within the plan. But given there's a lot of legislative direction and national direction and change coming our way at the moment, particularly around emissions reduction and in the climate change space, this sort of new strategic context is actually requiring a more comprehensive review of the RLTP. So what we're looking to do, which is beginning this year, is align with the nationwide planning timeframes for the NLTP and the LTPs, looking at the 10-year objectives and priorities and setting those out by early 2023. And that's as part of the reviewing of the strategic framework. And this all links back up to the the government policy statement on land transport, which is, as I understand it, being reviewed early next year. All of this work's being done within our planned budgets and resourcing, but it's really the priority work is around the broader thinking about transport funding and the review of the approach to emissions reduction, as I mentioned. So, and maintenance and resilience of our transport network remain those region-wide issues. And just comment on that as well, which I think is another question one of the councillors have asked before, is just in terms of some of the funding constraints around the NLTF going forward. So the advice we're getting from Whakamutunga is at the moment, staff, is that it's the NLTF is likely to be quite constrained going forward. We've obviously got more and more challenges there in terms of changes in our vehicle fleet and the amount of revenue coming into the NLTF. So this is really where we need to start looking at other options around Crown funding and support for our various investments in our transport networks. So one that's come about recently is through the emissions reduction planning is the Climate Emergency Response Fund, which was that $2.9 billion towards investment for climate change related work. And as we mentioned before with the PT work, there's an opportunity there to try and invest in things like decarbonising our bus fleet and other active and public modes of transport through that fund. So those are the other types of Crown funding, for example, that we can try and access as the NLTF becomes more constrained. In terms of the speed management planning, so we've got a new speed management rule which came into effect May this year. So this puts the responsibility for setting speeds with road control. This remains with road controlling authorities, but there's a need to have a region-wide network of consistency. And so the new role in speed management planning is there's a new role in speed management planning for regional transport committees and the regional council. And we're just currently as staff investigating an approach to the implementation here in Canterbury. It's very much in early stages of the work. We're seeking advice from Whakamutunga over the next 6 months, and they're developing guidance around how these speed management plans will be developed across the region. And this will help inform some advice that goes back through to the Regional Transport Committee. So we've got a Regional Transport Committee meeting coming up in August, and I'd suggest that maybe the next meeting of this committee in September, we should be able to provide a bit more information and direction on where that work's heading. Just in terms of emissions, as far as the regional speed management plan goes, so it's not a particular consideration within the speed management plans, emissions reduction, but all of this work links together with other various pieces of work that we have underway. So another piece of work that we have to do with the next year is the VKT reduction plans. This is part of the emissions reduction plan. So it's vehicle kilometres travelled. That's work that Whakamutunga is doing at the moment. That'll become a bit more evident as we go through that work with them. And then towards the middle of next year, that'll be something that we, as the councils here in the Greater Christchurch sub-region in particular, as a Tier 1 urban council, will need to implement those VKT reduction plans. That's likely to be incorporated through our Greater Christchurch Transport Plan and Investment Program. So while emissions not specifically a part of the speed management. This certainly it's an integral part of the broader transport planning that we do, of which speed management is a critical part of that, and for safety and other reasons as well. And lastly, just in terms of the paper, the Greater Christchurch Spatial Plan, so that work's continuing. We're in the point of evaluating the urban form options. We're having a look at the different transport packages so looking at our current planned and investment and interventions that we have available to us. What would mass rapid transit look like as part of that conversation? And also what would more enhanced investment and other interventions, things like, I'm not saying these are the things, but other things like road pricing, congestion charges, those type of things that are other interventions that levers that could be used. So it's a sort of a cumulative package, if you like, of transport interventions. So that's coupled with our future urban form discussions. And as I said before, around constraints mapping, those are critical components of that process. So yeah, so that work's continuing. We're aiming to have that drafted by early next year, consultation early next year on the spatial plan. And there's a number of other related programs to that, which we'll be briefing you on after this.
Thank you, Jess. We're going to be constrained by time here with this item alone, let alone 8.4. The option is to, and I personally do not want to hold up this next piece of work. So we're going to make available until 4:05 this paper. 2 this paper. We could come back at 4 o'clock, but then some of us have got some stuff at 4:30. So I think my option is to leave 8.4 on the table till September. I know that's not. I know that's not what members might want to do, but we need to do it justice also, and I don't think that we can do it justice in the time that's made available. So any comment on that? Councillor Mackenzie. Elizabeth.
Oh, sorry, I wasn't sure which Mackenzie you were referring to. Yeah, I did just have one quick question on speed management, and that was simply
Elizabeth, if you we'll get to your question, but we've got the matter of time that we've got available to finish this session.
Yeah, okay, I'm happy to defer it. That's fine.
Yeah, so is everybody else happy with that? So Phil?
I prefer we deal with it today for those councillors who are able to be here. It's a committee, it's not full council, so no, let's get it done. But
okay, so shall we?
That's not.
Just clarifying, if we continue and we run over time, will that then be time lost to the GCP discussion? Okay, cool.
4 o'clock for that one. 2 hours.
And people have to come back at 4 and move it here, but
I've got another meeting at 4.
So the thing like that.
Buttons, Peter. Button.
Thing with 8.4 is my advice, given the constraints we have after 4 o'clock, is to leave it on the table, but we will need a resolution to do that from councillors. You move. What are you moving?
Yeah.
Do you want to write that up? Let's deal with that now.
I'm not so sure, Chair, that we will need the full 2 hours for the GCP discussion. They
have got 2 hours available to them. It's their 2 hours, so they can fill it up. I think what we need to do is deal with this now so that we can use the next 15 minutes to deal with 8.3. So resolution, if you've got one. It's moved by Councillor Hands. Seconded by Councillor Mackay. That item 8.4, Clean Air Work Program, updating including 2020 winter work program, which will be in the spring probably by the time we get to talk about it, but be deferred until the September meeting. Okay. So moved by Councillor Hands, seconded by Councillor Knight. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against?
Against.
So that's carried. Who's against?
I'm
Okay.
against. I think we
Okay.
should talk about it now, but anyway, I'm probably in minority.
You are. Do you want it noted, Liz?
If you like, yep.
Okay, all right, that's done. So let's get back to where we were. So Elizabeth, your question.
On speed management. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. My question was for Jessie. So does how does the speed management consideration include emissions impact models for different speed zones and congestion, or does it deal only with safety impacts?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just ask Claire is a bit more closer to the detail, but my understanding is that the emissions modelling piece is not, if I'm wrong, Claire, a component part of the new speed management rule as such. But as I said before, there are a number of other programs of work that are underway around emissions reduction, which involve emissions modelling. A good example of that is the Brougham Street corridor, where Whakamutunga had consulted on changes to the Brougham Street corridor, which includes the modelled emissions reductions from a range of interventions, including speed reductions. So it's not just considered in isolation, is probably what I'm getting at. It's something that needs to be considered amongst a range of different factors. So might just ask Claire to comment as well.
So the role at the regional level is more around regional consistency of the approach to speed management rather than the details of setting the speeds, and it's likely to be regional principles. One of those principles might be considering the environmental impacts, but what we're working on now, these kind of workshops are more about how the process rather than the actual content of what those principles might be. That's going to come at a much later date. So it's the local road controlling authorities who would need to then work out how they are going to consider those factors if they become part of those principles. Does that answer the question?
Because I was just thinking about the health and air pollution report, which talks about vehicle emissions. And so I guess what I was thinking of, I was partly looking for that integration between different arms in terms of emissions and congestion and speed management, but also wondering whether it's worth having an approach that specifically uses the relationship between speed and congestion and emissions and actually starts from that point and goes from that point rather than, if you get what I mean, it's hard to explain. But
yeah.
Can I just say too, in regard to that, the VKT reduction plans, which I mentioned before, will be part of that. That's part of that consideration about mode shift, reducing the number of vehicles on our road, reducing numbers of vehicle kilometres travelled. This is all part of the sort of broader Greater Christchurch Transport Plan in particular, but also considerations that need to be made in a broader regional sense as well as we go forward. But particularly where the significant volume of our emissions is in our Tier 1 urban areas, that's where the main focus is. And it's an integration of all of these different programs and plans that all come together under that broader sort of transport network planning.
So the main drive behind the change in the speed management rule came out of Road to Zero and the safety focus, and that started
yes, I'm aware of that.
Years before the Climate Change Commission advice, before the Hakina paper around transport emissions, before the ERP, and so there is a significant shift going on in the transport planning sector to embed emissions in every aspect of transport planning. So the guys in speed management are aware of that and trying to factor that in at the end of like a big 3-year process as well. Yeah.
It just strikes me that speed is actually a really good way to regulate emissions. That's just, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you for the report. I've got a couple of questions. One being from page 40, and it's paragraph 14, and the implementing, again on the speed management, for the implementing of the rule. So I just wondered if, in terms of arriving at the principles, is Whakamutunga involving the trucking associations in that planning? That's one, and also though the New Zealand Police in terms of enforcing the implementation. That's one question. And my other question is in relation to the report, the full report, which I'll come to.
Yes.
Speed management planning that's undertaken by the road controlling authorities has engagement with New Zealand Police and other associations in terms of their engagement around setting speeds. As Claire said before, what this is about is trying to get regional consistency in all of those plans and those processes. And that's where those principles are quite important in terms of how we approach this. How you collectively bring it all together is part of the work that the RTC and the regional program of work is endeavouring to do. So, yes, to those two organisations, I believe the trucking associations involved, NZ Police definitely is.
Thanks, Jesse. And my other question, if I may, is from page 47. It's in relation to the Whakamutunga's National Resilience Program business case. And so there is the comment there, though, that was made in the submission by the councils that an alpine fault earthquake would render West Coast and Nelson Tasman region inaccessible by road or rail for some months. And I just, besides pointing that out to central government, I just wondered, have some sort of interim possible solutions also been discussed in terms of how we might manage that likely event, hopefully long-term future?
In terms of interim solutions, I'm not so sure there's specifically work that's happened on that. Part of our disaster resilience planning would incorporate thinking around our transport networks and access, but certainly coastal shipping is gaining a lot more focus from central government in terms of how we move goods around the country, particularly around the South Island, and just recently with Maersk and their investment in local coastal shipping as well. So there's opportunities there. So it's not just a reliance on road and rail. Certainly in areas where we have the opportunity to shift from road to rail, where it's not as impacted by natural hazards in the future, then that's an opportunity that we'll definitely be pursuing and have done through we held a freight summit recently, which had a range of different sectors involved, and some of the connections that have been made between different agencies around moving Kiwi Rail and some of the trucking companies about hubbing freight and moving more onto rail as opposed to moving it via road has that emissions benefit. It has less maintenance costs for the road network. There's a whole bunch of benefits that come from that. So it is part of the work that the central government's focused on, and particularly investment in coastal shipping will be one for us going forward, particularly with the West Coast. If we were subject to a alpine fault event, then that area of the South Island was cut off for periods of time. Yeah.
We're getting to the period where we need to probably stop this discussion and move to the next thing at 2:00, which we're 5 past. So I'd like to put the motion that's on the table that we receive the Integrating Urban Land Use and Regional Transport Work Program report. I have a mover for that, please. Thank you, Grant. Seconded by Councillor Sunkel. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, carried. Due to, unless there's anything urgent around discussion, I think we will we'll move on to the next meeting. We'll move on to the next meeting, which is on the 7th of September, starting at 1 o'clock. And can I just go to Megan for a Karakia to send us on our way? Thank you, Megan. I beg your pardon? Yeah, but we'll finish this out. I don't think there's part of that.
But I remember them all off by heart anymore. And I was going to read it to me. Inohia ki te urutapu nui o tāne. Kia wātea, kia mama, te nāko, te tinana. Te warua i te ara tangata. Koe ara e rongo whakeiri ake kia runga, kia tina. Haumi e hui e.